Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Relationship Matters livecast. Every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, we come on with a guest and we talk about relationships. You see, I believe that everything flows out of relationship. And so if we want a healthy life, if we want a healthy community, we need to have healthy relationships with not just our families, but also at work. And so our subjects kind of range all over the place, but mostly focus in on relationships that will affect you either at home or at work. And we talk about a variety of subjects. And the next couple of weeks here, I'm going to kind of talk about raising kids and whatnot. But today I have a special guest on, Alex Marriott. He's a great friend of mine, and he and I are going to talk about a really touchy subject in today's culture. We're going to tackle it. And that is, what does manhood look like today? What can we do? What can we do to be better husbands, better fathers, better humans, and be able to not sacrifice who we are and who we're designed to be? And so we're going to tackle that subject in a minute. Alex is the co-founder and of a meditation and prayer app company called Joy Over. He is also the director of Be Church Network and Experimental Church Planning Incubator. He's also executive pastor at The Movement, a church community designed to give voice to Jesus and his people. Alex has had previous career as a blacksmith, making architectural and artistic ironwork over 15 years. And I've seen some of that, and it's amazing. He's an incredible artist. And he's also married to his high school sweetheart, Sarah, for 23 years. They have 4 amazing children, 2 of those which are adults, and 1 which is married. And so, wow. We want to talk about if this is a perfect time and season of life, Alex, to talk about this subject matter because of what's going on in families all over the place, and because of COVID, because of other social pressures and whatnot. And so really want to welcome you, Alex. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. This is great.
Yeah. Alex and I are friends. We were actually did the Be Church thing together, and we've flowed together in different seasons of life. I guess we've come in and out of each other's life. And but him and his wife, Sarah, are amazing people. Their family are amazing. I love their kids, who are all older now. They're not kids anymore. I should not call them that, young adults. And we're just really excited to have you on to talk about this. Now, originally you and Sarah were booked to be on together and talking about raising teenagers, but I think we can still tackle a bit of that subject. But I want to do it from a father's point of view, or a man kind of point of view, Alex, because I don't know, what do you feeling like today, like with the stuff we see on social media and whatnot? And I'm not trying to be controversial here, but I think that in our effort maybe to honor women and their role in the world, we've actually diminished the men and their role. What do you think of that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of issues with the way we handle things in our culture right now. I'm actually a big fan at one side of kind of this postmodern movement where we're breaking down things we assumed in the past, and we're trying to redefine them and explore them again, almost from first principles. But I think too often we're throwing away the baby with the bathwater. And so we've kind of tagged this thing like toxic masculinity. Well, there is such a thing as really healthy masculinity, but we don't see examples of it. And I think there is such a thing as toxic femininity, but we're not allowed to talk about that right now. It's not the season for that, right? And so I think this is a temporary move in our society to diminish the role of males. I think primarily because males have had their chance. They've had their shot for a long time. They've been kind of the dominant voice. And so I hope that it'll come around. But you're right. I think that right now the male voice is diminished. But even still, we can still say what we want. So I don't think it's silenced too much. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, give us a hint, give the viewers a hint around what does healthy masculinity look like. And by the way, I'll just say to the viewers, like, you can ask questions in the comments. So we want you to join this conversation. And if you're a woman watching this today, we want you to join the conversation. We're hoping we could give some insight into how guys think, but also we'd like to have your feedback on what affects you negatively or positively, and whatnot. And so your voices are welcome here. We want to hear from anybody. So you can make comments, you can ask questions just by simply putting it into the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. It comes into the studio, and I'll make sure that Alex gets the question to him. So, Alex, what does healthy masculinity look like?
I think sometimes it's helpful to have a picture. And so the best example I can think of is this guy named Private Dawes, who was a World War II combat veteran, who won 2 Bronze Stars and eventually was awarded the Medal of Honor from the president himself for his participation in World War II. But he entered World War II as a volunteer and as a conscientious objector at the same time. And so he refused to carry a rifle. He refused to have any sort of combat defense of any kind, but managed to save hundreds of people in some of the most terrifying battles in World War II history. And so there's actually a movie made about him called Hacksaw Ridge. Beautiful movie.
Such a good movie.
But they actually had to diminish his accomplishments or else it would be unbelievable. Like in that one battle they show in Hacksaw Ridge, he saved up to 120 people in that one day. And and then he goes back and does it again the next day. Like it's unbelievable the commitment he had to being somebody who defends those who are hurting and weak and in trouble, and needed to stand up and defend his country, but refused to kill to do so. And I think that's the side where we split the middle on masculinity, where we think through the masculine move is normally the macho guy with the gun who's out there to destroy. And we think, I think that's the toxic end of masculinity. But there still has to be that method of defense, that reason to stand before somebody who is assaulting, and maybe not be the person who brings death, but the person who actually brings healing somehow in that moment. And so I think it takes a different kind of creativity and a different kind of courage to be able to be against the stereotype that we see in the world. I think it took more courage to not carry a gun than it does to carry a gun into combat. And so I think that's the kind of masculinity that I want to see in the world, and see a way to promote and be in the world.
Yeah, it's kind of like, a lot of times men are accused of not being in touch with their emotions or their feelings. And if you are, you're almost, put down. It's not manly. This whole idea of manly men is ridiculous. I always say real men cry, right? And so it's like being in touch with our emotions, but there's something that, maybe passed on from our fathers, whatever generation to generation. We were told that it's not okay to be emotional, that we got to just go and push through and drive through and be that, and I think that a lot of these narratives that have been blanketed on men have created both sides. It's created the manly man that thinks they got to be macho and in control, and then it's also created the other side of the problem is where you're not allowed to be in touch with your feelings and whatnot.
Exactly. So I think we have to figure out, how do we become the master of our emotional state, but still give it the strength that it deserves. And so unfortunately, I'm not that in touch with my emotions, not because I'm overly masculine, but because it's just, I might be somewhere on the spectrum. I don't know. But it's just one of those, that's one of my challenges in life is not necessarily understanding my emotions. And maybe that's just growing up in this culture and growing up in a household where I was never really allowed to have that emotional level, or maybe 15 years of being a blacksmith where it doesn't really matter how I feel. I have to get the work done. And so it doesn't matter how much pain or difficulty or how hot it is. It doesn't, I just don't just ignore it and push through. I think maybe it's a bad habit that we teach our kids sometimes.
Yeah. And I wonder if you could just speak to how, because you and Sarah do this so well, because you recognize that. I think the first thing I would say is that healthy masculinity is when you can actually recognize a blind spot or recognize something that you're not good at. Like I always say, you want to embrace who you are and who you're not, right? Yeah. And so that's where Sarah comes in to help you process those, or to help you know her feelings and whatnot. Could you maybe speak to that a little bit, just how your family dynamic, how they've worked with you in terms of you not being able to always understand your emotions?
Sure. I think that's where the cliche opposites attract comes in.
Yeah.
Where I think quite frequently the thing that you lack, you find in your partner. And so I'm the the rational ideas oriented kind of person. Love doing theology, love doing philosophy, love doing history, like all these sort of things that are outside of myself, thought processes. Where my wife has the superpower of relationship understanding and empathy, and so often she'll be working on a problem and need informational help, and I'll come in and be some backbone and help out with that sort of stuff. And then the other side of it, I'll go, here's a human interaction that I don't quite understand. What did I miss? And so she's a superpower at that sort of stuff. And I think we need to learn how to be aware of your blind spots. Otherwise, you never take the shoulder check. And I think too frequently we see the world the way we are, and we think, oh, this is the way that I'm built, and therefore the world just has to deal with it. And I think a way better way to say it would be, there are things I'm not great at. And because of that, I need to find good partners to be able to help fill out those areas that I'm lacking. And marriage is the primary place to do that. But I think in business, in your house, in your whatever it is that you find yourself doing in the world, you should actually find those partners that can check your blind spot, and that you can do the same for them, because I'm sure that there's things that you see that no one else sees. And so you have to figure out that place of relationship to be able to have those vulnerable moments to say, I don't quite get it. Can you help?
Yeah. So you've just touched on another maybe point of what a healthy masculinity looks like. And that is the ability to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah,
I think we've got this idea, like toxic masculinity says you don't have to ask. I can do it myself. I don't have to ask for help. Whereas healthy masculinity is like, you know what? I don't know this area. I don't understand this. Can you help me understand it? Yeah. The next one that I think you really pointed out well there, just to highlight it, is to honor each other's superpower. So one way that a healthy masculinity can present itself is through honor. So you honor, you just honored your wife's superpower, and you realize that, that's what she's really good at. So I need to trust her in that area. So that I think that's important to tap into for men, is that it's okay to admit when you don't know something or how to do something. And that vulnerability would probably open up your spouse's heart or open up someone else's heart to want to help you in the areas that you have weakness, where they have strength.
I think in almost every area that's true. The lack of vulnerability, I think, is one of these issues that's leading to the divide we have politically, is that there's no room to give the person that you're having an argument with any quarter in the argument. So as soon as they say something, I must say the opposite. And I think there has to be a place where we sit down in our dialogue with people of other faiths, people of other political persuasions, people of other opinions, and all kinds of different things. And if you start the conversation affording them the things that they get right, if you mention 2 or 3 things, like, I see why you have this heart towards this issue for these reasons, and I can see why you want to preserve X, Y, and Z, and I can understand that. And then you can say, but this is where we disagree. By starting from that place of common ground, it actually gives you a lot more room for trust. It's less combative. It's less me versus you. And I think anytime you're in an argument especially with somebody who's close to you, it's easy just to nitpick and to complain and to be confrontational, instead of saying, I see why you have this heart for this thing that's going on. So like the easy, again, using political, because it's a little bit further outside of our purview. It's a little further out. It's not as close as your home relationship, but I think it's easier to see because it's further out. Yeah. Is that there are things that our society does well that we need to conserve. And so the conservatives have a great point of view, saying, like, we have a stable society that functions fairly well. Yes, there's things that change, but let's not destroy the society that we're building in order to be able to build your utopia for the future. And so they actually have a really strong point of view that needs to be acknowledged. And then on the progressive side, there are things that need to be changed. There are people who are oppressed. There are people who aren't being represented properly. There are people who are excluded from the benefits that this society has. And those things need to be pushed forward. We need to press in and change the world to fit these people better. But we can't. But that's still, like, each side needs to acknowledge that, yes, there's things to change, and yes, there's things to keep. And now we just need to negotiate the things that we keep and the things that we change, instead
Right.
of changing everything or keeping everything and then just
Right.
bashing against each other on those 2 points of view.
Right.
And so I think the same thing happens in your household relationships, is that whatever the core issue you're arguing over, there's something true about their argument.
Yeah.
And so you have to go, like, maybe it's not even the thing they're claiming. There's something underneath that is a vulnerability, a hurt, something that is a resentment that's built up from a previous argument. And so there's some kernel in there that is the source of the argument and not necessarily the subject we're talking about. And so how can you actually acknowledge in the other, I understand, I have empathy for your position. I understand why you're saying these things. I understand, and if you can outline their position in a way that they don't argue, it means that they've been heard and they've been understood. And then you can start negotiating in between, instead of just going, well, I think this, you think that, and so I think it's a far more productive way of encountering any disagreement.
So to build on that, healthy masculinity then has empathy involved in it, where you can actually put yourself in their shoes and give them space and grace, as I always say, give them space and grace to get their feelings out, so that, and then ask questions for clarification to find out what it is, and then present your thoughts and your ideas towards it. And so be willing to negotiate. I always say you can win and lose at the same time. You might be able to win over facts, but you lose because your attitude's wrong. You haven't given them space or grace. You haven't, they haven't been heard. You've just demanded, or you've been as aggressive,
Exactly.
And so, that's really good, Alex. Is we gotta, this idea that men have to dominate or control or be aggressive to get their way. I think they see things like from a kind of from a, if I don't win, I lose, instead of seeing a win-win opportunity.
Yeah. If you get into an argument with somebody you're close with and you dominate them and you win the conversation, you still lost. You can crush your spouse in an argument and win the argument, but then you're living with a crushed spouse. That's you've lost. I'm sorry. That's not how it works. And so how do you find a way of being as charitable with someone's point of view as possible, and realizing that they're coming from something sincere, and you need to treat everything that comes up sincerely. And so it's hard. Exactly. And the further away you are in an issue, the harder it is to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. So how just some practical things, Alex, how do we start to shift that? If we're a guy that is, maybe there's always cause and effect. So maybe we've had some pain in our life. Maybe we've gone through divorce. We've gone through maybe, bad upbringing or whatever. If somebody's listening and really struggles with that vulnerability piece and doing some of the things we're talking about, what's a good starting point for somebody to start seeing change in their life?
I think you need to understand the story that you tell yourself. And so if the story that you tell yourself about yourself is I'm the tough guy, then go ahead and be the tough guy in that argument. And so if I'm going to be the tough guy, I'm going to let you unravel the entire argument first. Before I interject, I'm going to let you spend your energy on me, and I can receive that because I'm the tough guy. And because of that, then your next step is I'm going to be courageous and try to outline what you said to me and reflect it back to you in a way that you can hear. And so I think it depends on the story that you're telling yourself. I think the answer is in that description of yourself, how you see the scenario. It's hard because there's more people there's more positions than there are people. I might have 4 or 5 conflicting stories in my head that I tell myself. But as we unveil the issues we have, the hurts we have, the things that we've been carrying around our entire lives from our upbringing, from relationships we had as kids, from our parents, we carry around lots of hurts that we don't expose, we don't see. And so a lot of our opinions and a lot of our life are kind of shaped by those things.
Right.
And so it's doing the hard work of peeling it back and go, oh, I behaved this way because I was pushed hard as a kid, or because I was bullied, or because my dad never really showed me he appreciated me. And so the only thing I could do is validate his appreciation from winning at sports or something. And so some of those are kind of cliche answers, but they're cliche because they're common. Yeah. And so I think we need to really figure out who we are and where we're coming from and what the foundation of our argument is, and then also be able to listen to the other and hear their hurts and their trauma and the things they're going through. And then I think we both need to look at the other person as somebody who deserves our compassion and ourselves. And I think too often we make the person an outsider, and then it's easy to fight. It's easy to be aggressive in those scenarios.
Yeah, like why is it that you think that? I mean, this is a host of answers, but let me ask it this way. Sorry, everybody. What can a guy do to start making those changes or identify? I guess how do they identify what's not working for them and what is working for them? I always say a tipping point is it harming you or is it helping you? So that could be a really practical,
fruit.
Yeah, right. And so, so how does somebody start to realize and be aware that they need to make change?
I think you have to stop is the first part.
Right.
I think we live such frenetic lives that we're on from thing to thing to thing over and over and over again. And like me, again, being an ideas guy, if I have a spare 10 minutes, I put my earbuds in and listen to a podcast. Like I'm not going to sit and go, what am I really worried about? And often the thing that you're thinking about when you're going to bed at night, you're ruminating over something, is often a key to the thing that has been bothering you the entire time that you didn't listen to. And so I think simple things like just journaling and just you have nothing to write, just write whatever's on top of your mind and just write it down on the page. And not writing for a purpose and not trying to explain something, but just whatever you're thinking, just put it on the page and let your brain kind of sort through stuff and sift. I think,
and then leave it for a day and then come back and read it fresh, like you're reading it about someone else.
Yeah.
That sometimes that third person view helps you kind of see, like, right, you get a bird's eye view.
Yeah, because your mind isn't. Oh, you don't have one mind. Your mind is a committee, and you can see that every time you walk into the fridge. Like you open the fridge and you go, "Oh, there's a piece of chocolate cake. I really want the piece of chocolate cake. But I'm on a diet. I really shouldn't eat the piece of chocolate cake. But I really want it. But I really don't want to." And so it's like, that debate over and over again. You're hitting because you've got a multitude of voices that are part of you, and each of those voices is there for your preservation. We just have to be better at listening to them and putting them in their context. And so the voice that wants to eat the chocolate cake is part of our survival mechanism to be able to make sure we have enough calories to survive. And right now we live in the West where food is fairly cheap, and we have anything. We have an over access to food, not an under access to food. And so we have to learn how to quiet that voice down because it's not protecting us anymore. And so just by taking the time to actually listen to the voices, listen to your anxieties, and even feeling your own physical tension. If you're walking into a space and suddenly your shoulders start to go up, or your eyebrow starts to furrow, if you just take a time to be able to pay attention to what's going physiologically in your system, you can actually find the root of your emotional state a lot easier. That's one of the tools that I've had to use over my life because I don't have immediate access to my emotions. And so be able to go, oh, my back is kind of sore. What am I worried about right now? What's going on why am I holding tension in that place?
That's a
or
great
I get headaches. I get headaches, or my left eye starts to get a little tighter. It's like, oh, I'm under stress. I need to pay attention to this and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that's great advice.
I think listening
to your body. Yeah. So healthy masculinity, then another point is they listen to their bodies. They listen, they watch for the cues. I really like that sense. If you walk into a place and you're uncomfortable, ask yourself why you're uncomfortable. Start to dig in a little bit why you're uncomfortable. That could help as well. So I'm going to just make a kind of a blanket statement, which, it's a generalized statement. I don't want anybody to be offended by it, but men are often insecure, and especially leaders. That we can be very insecure. We can be very defensive when trying to bring something out. And I think one of the ways to answer the last question, I think one of the ways that we can actually get insight and get awareness is by asking others, how do I present? How do I show up? What do you see in me? Or what are my strengths? What are some things I could work on? Right. But we don't do that because of this thing called insecurity or this thing called a defensiveness. What do you think is the root of that in our lives in terms of men? Because men seem to really struggle with that. And I think we hide it with talent and with fun and with money and all kinds of things. But I think it's as prevalent in men as it is in women.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a human problem, not a man problem. I just think we don't have the same tools. You're not given the same tools as girls are.
Right.
And so I think there's a certain amount of emotional play acting that happens in young girls. It doesn't happen in young guys. Right. And so guys play with trucks and army, toys, whatever, and not with dolls who are having social interactions in their and so we don't emulate those things in our brain. Right. And I think that's largely a cultural thing. I don't think that's a natural thing at all.
Yeah.
And so I think it comes down to everyone has a core insecurity. It's just part of being in a world that is out to kill you. It's like if you, as much as grandiose as we think nature is and as wonderful, we want everything back to nature. Well, if you go out by yourself in nature, nature is gonna rip you to pieces. And so, so we have to have this system for survival in our brain. And some of us that looks like shame. So we socially feel like we are not worthy, or we have that that base insecurity. Some people it's control. They feel like they need to have some semblance of order and control in their life, and other people it's just plain fear, just that anxiety that builds in the bottom of their brain. For me, it's that last one. I have that fear cycle, and everyone, the superpowers that you build in the world are actually based on the core insecurity that you try to overcome in your life. And so my superpowers are all around information and around study and trying to understand. So that if I come into a scenario, I'm starting something new, like I'm working on this app. Well, I've not been an app developer before. So I spent probably 200 hours listening to books, listening to podcasts, listening to the best voices in the field to be able to get over the insecurities that I have around that subject. Then I can move in with confidence and be assertive and be confident in those areas. Some people, their core insecurities are based around shame, and so they need to be something that they're not. They need to present as if they have their life together, because it doesn't matter if their life is together. It's what people think it is, because that shame, they're afraid of other people. Or some people in that scenario, they turn it upside down, and their superpower becomes because I don't quite think I fit, I'll make sure I don't fit, and so then they're the anti-style person who goes off and they become the individual who is not like no one else on earth, and so they flaunt the fact that they're different, and so it each works out differently in each of our lives. We each have our own coping mechanisms, and there are patterns we can find you're not unique in like where there's billions of people, and so other people are going to find similar coping mechanisms. So it is something that we can work through with others for sure. Right. We just have to be aware of what that core insecurity is that we have. And then often that's a place where we'll lash out. That's a place where if we're unhealthy, that core insecurity is probably the thing of driving that unhealth. And then but again, this also gives you your superpowers. I think anything that we have in our life that's a strength is at the same time our biggest weakness. And so
I often say that our biggest strengths are can also be our greatest weaknesses, and so we have to be conscious. Self-awareness brings choice, so we have to be aware of them. And that's what you're saying, is we need to discover what those are and why they are, and then we can actually start to deal with them and work through them, because we don't have to fight so hard. Just want to mention, anybody watching, if you have questions or you want to make comments, we want you to be part of this discussion. Go ahead and just put them in wherever you happen to be watching this. And even after, if you're watching the replay or you're watching, later because you couldn't make it for the 1 o'clock time slot, ask the question anyway. I get notified of questions and I'll try and answer them. And Alex follows me on all those social too, so he can, if he sees a question, he'll answer it. But make sure you're participating in the conversation for sure. So Alex, as people, as men, and we want to start kind of changing. We want to start to kind of evolve in our lives. And you gave some solid advice there on how to walk through that, how how to start taking those steps. Is there kind of a way that any tips you have on how a man can ask for help? Because we don't ask for directions and we don't ask for help, but is there some kind of practical steps or practical ways that somebody could start the process? Because I think if anybody's watching and they don't know how to take that step, then they're going to stay stuck in their insecurity, and it's a terrible way to live. I want to live free. I have promises to live an abundant life, and so I want to live that abundant life out. It doesn't mean a perfect life, but it means that I want to live free from insecurity. I grew up with a fear of failure, and so I fought hard to overcome that, right? And it's not that it never presents itself anymore, but it's way far between now. I don't struggle with failure anymore because I know I was able to ask for help. I was able to get the strength, the awareness I needed to make the changes. But how could a guy start to ask for help when he needs it? I know, and I'm asking this because I'm a relationship coach and written in a relationship book, and I help couples all the time. And the number one thing is they always come way later than they should have. Yeah. They wait until it's absolutely crisis end of life thing, and then they come and ask for help. What if they had asked help at the beginning? I can't tell you how many said, I wish we'd come to see you 10 years ago or 15 years ago and whatnot. And so I wonder what I mean, other than just the obvious, go ask for help, but what are some things that they could work out within them to get themselves to the place they would?
There's a couple things that come top of mind. One of them is that being one of these meditation coaches now with building this app, there's a phrase that I practice and that I help other people acknowledge, and that is, I'm a human, I'm imperfect, and that's okay. And so, like, my wife is a human, and she's imperfect, and that's okay. It's like there's no perfect people. We don't get to do that. That's and so, just starting with that. That understanding that we all have our issues, and again, we all have our core insecurity as well. And so everyone, if you go into a room and you think you don't belong there, that you're somehow a fraud, every single person in the room probably feels the same way. And if they don't, they're probably arrogant. And so it's like the flaws on one side or the other. And so that's one side of it. But for me, I'm also, because I'm a less emotional person, coming in from the other side would be cost benefit analysis. What's the cost of actually being vulnerable with somebody, and what's the benefit of being vulnerable with somebody? So you getting insight on your blind spot. You can't see it. You can't see your blind spot. You need somebody else to do that for you. And so being blindsided is never good. And so then also in the cost benefit analysis, the vulnerability itself is fruitful. Whether or not you solve the thing that you're looking to solve, just being vulnerable. Brene Brown wrote a huge book full of scientific studies and up-to-date psychological research on being vulnerable, and all the things that it does for you in your emotional state, and for your emotional health, and then for your relationships. And even far back, like Ben Franklin had a principle where if he had somebody that he was disagreeing with, instead of trying to bridge the gap by giving them something or being generous with them, instead he borrowed something from them. And so there's a specific case where the guy had this huge collection of really specific books, and he has having a political issue with this guy in the U.S. government. And so Ben Franklin went and borrowed one of the most expensive and significant books from this guy's collection, and as a personal favor to the guy. And then that he held on to it for 3 or 4 weeks, and then he gave it back and thanked him for his generosity. And what that does is it allows the other person to have the power in the scenario.
Wow.
And I think so frequently we want to come in as the hero, as the rescuer in a scenario. And what we need to do to actually build trust is come in and be able to receive help and encouragement and tutelage and instruction, and be the vulnerable party in the relationship. And that vulnerability always leads to better intimacy. And so when we put that barrier between you and somebody else, there's a barrier between you and somebody else. Like, of course, you're not going to be as close to them as you should be. And so if you find yourself having a hard time having deep relationships, it might be because you're not vulnerable with people. It might be that you're too vulnerable with people, and you need to figure out how to bridge that gap of oversharing. But I think more frequently, it's that people are under, especially in this neighborhood in Kelowna. This is one of the least vulnerable places I've ever been. And so people hide behind their wealth, and they hide behind their titles and their education, and they're trying to show how strong and how smart they are, and rarely do I find people here are really super vulnerable.
Right. Vulnerability is so important, I think, and it is like you referred to Brene Brown. I love her material because her research is so solid, right? And it's that research. I like what you said about that. Like, do the cost benefit analysis on it if you're a linear thinker, and it might help you come to that decision that it's better to ask for help. The other thing is I think of is when I ask for help, I'm actually empowering someone else. And I love that example of Ben Franklin. Like, you're giving somebody else a gift when you're being vulnerable with them. It's a gift. And I think that, I in my book, I talk about that, the trust pillar. Transparency is one of the ways you build trust. And a lot of people will push back on that, saying, well, how do I know how transparent to be? It's been used against me in the past. And I always say it's appropriate to the depth of the relationship. So there's a difference, in other words, between secrets and privacy. And so, but you can simply just say, I'm not willing to talk about that. That's private. And you're still being transparent because you're telling them that you're not willing to talk about it. Whereas if you keep a secret, that diminishes, that will hurt your trust equity. And so for men, I think we keep secrets. We hide things because we're scared of the reaction, what we're going to get. So we're dishonest. That's one whole pillar I talk about is honesty. We're dishonest because we don't want our wives or want somebody to find out, that we have a weakness in that area, or that we were doing something we know we shouldn't have been doing, whatever. And so that diminishes, I think it diminishes our masculinity when we have to hide behind things and we have to hide truth. I think healthy masculinity can be transparent and vulnerable, as you said. And I think that's true. That's another sign or a marker for healthy masculinity, is to be able to be vulnerable. Even when you don't know the answer, you can say, I don't know the answer. That's not a failure. That's not because you're dumb. It simply means that you don't know the answer. And by being transparent, you're going to actually invite somebody else to speak into your life, and you can learn from them. You're giving them a gift.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we so often want to partition off our negative emotions and partition off the things that we struggle with, and ignore them. But I think they fester in the dark, and I think we need to expose all those unhealthy thoughts to the light and be brave enough to confront them. And it's hard to do. And so I think that's one of the things that maybe that's the challenge of whatever the most frightening thing in your imagination is right now. Maybe that's the thing you need to address. That might be the thing standing out from the backdrop that is the most dangerous part. And maybe if you, again, reframing is such a big thing. If it becomes your adventure in life to confront the thing that you're stuck on, you can turn it into a video game style accomplishment. I got a new merit badge today because I did something that I would have been too afraid to do before. And so like people who have fear and shame and public like decency issues, or they're too agreeable, one of the best sort of tools you can, like, low risk, no actual things can go wrong. Go to the mall, walk around in between the shops and that kind of stuff, and go in the middle of the hallway and just lie down on the floor. Just take a break. Just lie down on the floor. It's socially weird. It's no one does it. It's completely out of the box. But then, and you're not going to get arrested. You're not going to get shunned. No one's going to laugh at you. People might ask you if you're okay. You say, "Oh yeah, I'm just taking a break. I'm just relaxing." But by doing something that's socially out of the norm, you can build self mastery, and that's one of the things that you can confront your fear. You can be more able then to speak up in scenarios where you normally you'd be intimidated. But you just practice when there's no stakes. You practice when there's no consequence, doing things that are out of the ordinary. And so then I think that's those sort of things where if you want to actually build a strength, you have to do the work. And so owning a gym membership doesn't help. So many people own the gym membership, they don't lift the weights. And so you actually have to find something difficult to do and lift the weights in practice. And then when you come to a confrontation in real life, if I've spent the time with lifting the weights in the gym, then when I go and I see the boulder or I see the thing I need to move or I have to do the work in the real world, then I have the strength necessary to do it out in the open.
Yeah. Wow. That is a lot of wisdom bombs right there. That's awesome. That's awesome. There's so many, there's just so many dogmas about manhood and about, these things that we just think that we have to do. Here's another one: competitiveness. Mm-hmm. It's like men seem, and this is a blanket statement again, very competitive. And in some circles, in sports circles, it's okay. You get better by being competitive. Yeah. But in other areas, work areas, sometimes that competitiveness comes across as not good. And so we're told not, and now in today's culture, in what I call the participation ribbon culture, we've kind of removed that competition in a sense because we don't want anybody's feelings to be hurt. But I think we've also removed what you were talking about, that tension of actually extending and trying harder and doing something that is difficult. So any thoughts on that competitive nature of men, like the toxic masculinity versus the healthy masculinity?
Yeah, I think it's back to where we started. There are so many things in our culture that have caused issues or problems in the past. We just want to excise completely and remove. And I don't think almost any of those problems are issues of the nature itself. It's the degree or scale that it's emphasized at. And so because people have been overly competitive, and that some people on the margins have been injured or not included because they don't fit a certain category in our competition, that we need to remove all competition. And I think again, it's a tension to be managed and not a problem that necessarily has a solution. And so I think we do need to raise kids with enough pressure, enough challenges in their life in safe environments, so that when they get into the real world, they're not broken. Right. And so I think if we work on a participation ribbon system instead of a merit badge system, I think kids just don't ever gain the skills they need to cope with competition in real life. Right. And so how do we find, again, places that are safe to have competitive environments? And so I love board games. Board games are a great model of a set of economic problems. They're a model of decision making and strategy, and they're low fidelity and there's no risk. You at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who won Monopoly. I'm no richer because I won Monopoly. And so I think so. Again, this is where the role of the father is really handy. That the role of the mother typically is nurture, and the role of the father is typically more challenging. Right. And I think we accidentally found a brilliant system where I was a blacksmith. I was working full time. I was out of the house for most of the day when the kids were home, and so Sarah was the one who raised our kids for the entire elementary school years. And then we moved. We changed positions. Sarah was the primary breadwinner for a while. I was the stay-at-home dad trying to build a church. And at the same time, that handover happened. The kids are in middle school and high school, and I'm far more okay, figure it out. Like, here's your things to do. If you have an immediate problem, I'll help you with the immediate problem, but I'm not going to do it for you. And so you need how do we figure this out? And then also challenging them, saying, if you get your homework done early, we can start a whole class you designed for yourself. We'll call it the good stuff. And so one of my kids was into baking, so she would bake all day. And so another kid was into programming and writing and that. So they each had their thing that they were super interested in, that we challenged them to become masters at. because and the challenge of actually like gives them incentive to get their work done and do the thing they want to do, and also grow in the areas that they're investing in. And so I think this is just the pattern of knowing when it's appropriate to nurture and when is it appropriate to start changing the scale into adding more and more challenge into their life as they develop. Right. And I think this is the issue that you're seeing in the worst impulses of the left. The left in general, the liberal end of the spectrum, is far more interested in compassion and in care, and the conservative side tends to be a little bit more on the, you got to tough it out and figure it out. And I think there has to be a balance again between those two impulses. How do we figure out in each individual case with each individual person, not as a general rule, each kid is going to have their own level that they can be challenged at, and their own amount of compassion and care that they need. And how do you alternate between those flows where you challenge and then bring them back in and debrief and help and scrape off their help. The kid goes out on their bike and scrapes their knee, yet they have to be allowed to do that, but they also need the care and comfort after they do scrape their knee to know it's okay. And I think that pattern is hard. It takes effort and energy and time. And so that's So again, it's not a one or the other. It has to be that tension between the two. And how do you do both well? Yeah. And then it's also where we try to put all the masculinity on the man side and all the femininity on the female side. And it doesn't, it's not really true. It's an overlap. There's a Venn diagram where men are typically more masculine and women are typically more feminine, but both are aspects of being human. And that unless you have both care and assertiveness, it's hard to succeed in anything in life. Yeah. So often the best managers are actually very nurturing, and often the best top leaders, although they have to be assertive, they if they don't care about their people, it doesn't go well. And so how do you find both of those aspects of your personality and allow them to have strength and allow them to have see the light of day, let them grow and be mature versions of those things, be mature masculinity and mature femininity in yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So we're got about 10 minutes left. Let's spend this time out. I just want to hear a little more about the fathering, because I really wanted to touch on that today. I think dads are struggling in this day and age. And so is there anything practical, like in terms of a dad's role? I really like what you said there, because Sandy and I switched off. Like I was sometimes the more the caregiver, the nurturer, and she was the one saying, get it done and figure it out. But there was times when it was reversed. I always laugh and tell a story of Justin, our son, fell on his bike one time, and I was running out there, and then Sandy passes me going even faster, and I scoop the bike up to make sure it's okay, and she scoops up Justin to make sure he's okay, and we kind of laugh about it now, but it was because I'm a facilitator. I wanted to make sure he had a bike to ride. So if he broke it, it was care for him, but it was manifest in that I went for the bike instead of the kid. And so it could seem like I wasn't caring, but I actually was, because I wanted to make sure he had a bike. And so in the same way, I believe that men, and I actually write about this in my book, but I believe men and fathers particularly have, certain roles, although they can blend together for sure in different seasons and different times for different kids. But I do think that dads carry something in them that the kids need, and moms carry something that they need. So could you just speak, because we're talking about guys here, what are some fatherhood principles you think that we need to grab a hold of in this day and age?
I think the biggest principle of anything that you produce, in your business, in your personal goals in your life, and in raising your kids, if you don't have the right goal, you'll never get the right result. And too many parents want to have happy kids. And the thing that Sarah and I were committed to from the beginning is we wanted to have happy adults. Right. And so when you're raising your kid, if you're just raising a kid, then it's easy to give into them. It's easy to have their current happiness be the center of your attention.
Oh boy,
But you
that's
need to
good.
figure out what's the thing that's going to produce their long time health and their long time growth and their long time enjoyment and happiness. And
Wow.
so having the discipline to finish the dishes when you start the dishes is one of those things that you may not think about when you're older, but if you never learned it, it's really hard to learn as a 20-year-old.
Right.
Being able to have the discipline of or just the basic habits of hygiene and health and organization, and like those are things that are practiced and they're built into you over time.
Yeah.
And I think too often where we get caught up in the giving into the whining of the now, because kids are a challenge. But any battle that you lose to your 3 and 4-year-old, you're going to lose again to your 13 and 14-year-old. And
Right.
And if they don't learn those kind of lessons, it's really hard for a whiny kid to get employed and to keep a job
Yeah.
or have a career or make it through their university setting. And so always thinking about the character and the nature of the long-term happiness and fulfillment of your child. And then if you have that as your goal, then it's easier to push through the local issue, the local time frame issues. Right. And so then specifically on the father side, it's how do you call out the things in your kid? How do you not just accept where they are in this moment, but go, what capacities do you have? Who could you be? And then both with challenge and lots of encouragement, how do you help your kid realize their potential in themselves and give them the proper tools to be able to move forward to achieve those goals? How do you, if someone has the capacity, they hear, like one of our kids just hears music differently than their kids do, just had an ear for it.
Right.
How do you help them sit down and do the work? Because it's actually more discouraging for them to sit at the piano and not do it well because they can hear the difference. And so how do you challenge them to say, that the thing that you hear, your siblings don't hear that. And so if you spend the time now and dedication and practice to be able to play the thing that you hear, that your capacity for this is much higher. Right. And so how do you find those things in your kid and call them out in them and encourage them enough and challenge them? Again, that tension, both at the same time. You have to bring nurture to bear if you're going to be challenging. And so how do you do that, especially with younger kids, and develop them into being healthy, stable adults who have skills?
Yeah. Wow. I also often say that fathers have the ability that we need to model good decision making. Far too often we try and make it for the kid and like by telling them what to do and never letting them make a decision and allowing them to, experience the consequence, whether positive or negative, of that decision. And so I think, and part of the reason is because I think sometimes us as dads, we don't model that. We just tell them what to do. You do it because I'm your dad. That's why you do it. Instead of helping them see and make decisions. So I think at the core, a father is really a facilitator. We want to facilitate that happy life. I love what you said about, don't try and make happy kids, make happy adults. I often say, don't.
There is time for authority, though. There is time to correct and say, I did tell you to do this, and I am your dad, and you have to do this. But that's usually for us was followed up with, do you trust me? Like, I care about you and I love you. And I'm telling you this, not because I'm a tyrant. I'm telling you this because I actually want your health in the long run. Do you trust that I love you? And then they go, oh yeah, I know you love me. It's like, okay, then I'm not going to ask you to do something that's going to hurt you. And so every time that authority is coupled with compassion, it's way more persuasive. It's way more effective. And again, it's not just a parenting thing. This is a business thing too. It's like, well, my butt's on the line if you mess this up because I'm the boss. I'm going to come down on you, but it comes down on me harder. And so anytime that you're supervising somebody, you're the one really who's responsible. Right. And so, so again, all these life lessons, like they always work themselves out in concentric circles from your life. And so everything we're talking about in parenting is true in employment, isn't true in every other aspect of our life.
Yeah, it's so true. I always tell parents, if you want to be your kids' friends when they're adults, you need to be their parents when they're kids.
Yeah.
If you want to be their friends when they're kids, you won't have them as friends in their adulthood.
Yeah.
And it's so true. There's times we're the parents, not the kids. They they don't run the house, we do, but we want to empower them. And so I really like where you went there with that, Alex. And so thank you for that. 5 minutes left. What's anything on husbandry? We might have
the complexity goes up, and as when you go to to parent to relationships,
maybe that could be a whole hour in itself. Couldn't it?
Probably should be. I think one of the biggest things is there's things that I need, and I see everything in my world through my gifts, through the things I'm good at, and the things that I need, my insecurities, and so I tend to give the thing that I need.
Right.
And not necessarily the thing that my wife needs.
Right.
And so in that relationship, I have to perpetually remind myself that the thing that she needs is the thing that she's probably doing for me. And so she is the first person to give me verbal affirmation on all kinds of things that are going on. And I'm almost nonverbal when I'm not in a space like this. Yeah. And so I have to like make notes on my phone to alert me to say, oh, by the way, send your wife a text message because she needs it. And so that's just part of the rhythm of, and she understands that if she gets a random text message, in the middle of the day, it's probably because I set an alarm to do it as a reminder, but she knows that's how I care for her. Right. And so she understands.
Like, you set the alarm that showed the care. Right. Yeah.
And so being self-aware and then meta a little bit in your relational conversations with your, like, especially with your spouse, like you have to talk about the relationship, like not just talk about the relationship, but talk about the dynamics of the relationship, talk about the dynamics of the relationship. And so you have to kind of like bring some abstraction to your relationship and figure out your patterns.
Why do guys get so weirded out about doing that? Why do like a lot of men try to just avoid that? They don't want to sit down and have that conversation. And yet, if they just would do it even a little bit, it would bring so much life to their spouses. Like, what's the resistance in us that we don't want to do that?
I don't know. I guess it's different for everybody. It's be harder for the next generation than for ours, even on that one, because vulnerability is maybe our issue. I think like Gen Z has a far less vulnerability issues, but they're going to have a lot more issues with authenticity. And so because authenticity is they're one of their prime values, being anything that seems contrived is difficult for them to stomach. And so I think one of the things is like, no AstroTurf for millennials and Gen Z. So you actually have to come with, they have to understand that the mechanism that we're talking about is itself authenticity. It's like, this is how I can authentically love you, is by building this plan, this structure outside of the mind natural flow. And so again, it's just being aware of what you're aware of, even like it's just more and more of this metacognition coming into play. Yeah.
It's so good. Well, thanks, Alex. That was it went way too fast again. It always does. It always does on this show, but it was like very enlightening around that. I think it's a conversation that we should not be scared to have. If we want healthy relationships, we got to talk about masculinity and femininity. We have to talk about our differences and our sames and all those things. And I just think one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you is because of that, because a lot of people avoid it. Because we talk about masculinity does not mean we discount femininity or woman power. I've got 2 daughters and a daughter-in-law and a granddaughter and a wife. Justin and I used to joke, you and your son, you're the only guys in the house. So, but it's like, it doesn't mean we don't honor and respect that. But I think here's what I believe. I'll wrap up with this. If we could understand what healthy masculinity is and operate in it, we would actually be in a position where we actually recognize our women and give them the value that they deserve. we would actually hold them in higher regard. We would see them as equals. We would see them as partners, and we would see them as very capable, and they should be rewarded as such. And so I think this idea of the feminist movement has polarized the masculinity and femininity, when really we were designed to have those two things together, working together for the best outcome. And
Agreed.
so I think just by having this conversation, we can at least help that. So don't be scared of the conversation, people. Talk about it. Okay, so just to wrap up here, I want to just remind everybody, this is every Thursday, 1 p.m., Relationship Matters Livecast. Next week, I have Darlene Unraw, a friend of both Alex and I, and she's going to be on talking about a million little conversations to have with your children. So you don't want to miss that one. If you have a friend who is a parent, make sure you tell them about this and that they can find me, and share this link and share this video with anybody you think could benefit from this conversation. And make sure you share it out there so that we can get this conversations about relationships going on a wider level, because I think it's really important, especially in today's day and age. We need to have this conversation. Also, announcing again, last week I announced to you, I have actually taken the first section of my book and put it into a live online video course. And so you can download that and purchase it. And just go to markgordon.ca. And on there, you're going to see, you click on what I do or what I offer, and it's going to say courses. And just click on there, and it'll take you right to the course. I'm offering it. So if you're on this live cast or you see this later, if you just put in the code appreciation as you check out, you'll get it for half price. And so I'm offering that here in our launch. And so I really want to encourage you to take that, to be able to take it's just solid principles on how to have healthy relationships, how to build a strong foundation in your relationships. And so I hope you enjoy it, and look forward to feedback on that. We talked about blind spots today. On that same website, you can also take the free blind spot assessment, and it'll tell you what style of personality you have and what potential blind spots come with that. That is a great exercise. I've done it with families. I've done it with husbands and wives. I've done it with leadership teams, and it's always enlightening, and it always helps understand each other better. So all kinds of resources on my website, markgordon.ca. You can go and check them out there. Thanks for watching this week. We'll talk to you next Thursday. Have a great week.